Welcome back to Life After Trauma. I'm your host, Jess, a certified trauma informed life coach. If you're new to the podcast, we bring women from around the world together through conversations that will empower, support, and inspire you on your healing journey. This week on the podcast, we have Ann Hince, author of A Pathway to Insight. After a visit with a holistic doctor, Ann was able to release deeply repressed emotions from past trauma and see significant changes in her life and body. Today, Anne and I will be discussing the techniques she used to release trauma and repressed emotions so that you can do the same to help you along your healing journey. Hi, Anne. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we get into discussing EFT and the other healing modalities you've had success with, can we talk about why emotions and trauma get trapped in the body?
Well, they get trapped in the body because we don't know how to deal with them, right? We're not taught how to work with them, and so we end up suppressing them, and they just get stored inside, and we have no idea. We don't know that's what's happening until we maybe at some point realize it's happened, and we go back and undo all that stuffing that we've done all over the years. But some of us never do that. My brother never did that, and he's died already. So some of us decide to do it and some of us don't, which is an interesting question in itself.
It's hard work, isn't it? Like, I completely understand what you're saying. I have you ever read The Untethered Soul?
Yeah, I love that book. Yes, multiple times.
Same. Yes. Okay. So it's like that chapter where he's talking about the triggers and he uses that example about the thorn. I actually talked about this on the last podcast recording I did. But for anybody who didn't listen to that one, what he's saying is that a repressed emotion is like you have a thorn in you. And so if somebody says something or does something and it kind of pushes up against that thorn, then you are like, oh, okay, that hurts. And that's when you realize that there's like something there. There's something under the surface.
Yeah, and that's what's happened to me. That was what started my journey, and it was
Yeah.
a couple of other mothers at my boys' school, and we were just talking. I had a little business at the time, and I made a decision that these two other women who were very self-confident, self-assured, authority type women in my mind, and I was not. I was a scared mother on the inside, and they told me I'd done something wrong. So they pushed up against my thorn. And my
Mm-hmm.
mind just spun out of control. I could not stop it spinning just over everything, over what I'd said, what they'd said, what I did, what I could have done differently. All those different permutations would not stop spinning through my mind. And it was at the end of that I realized, okay, this is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt a little bit like how I'd react when my dad, who was my authority figure, had told me I'd done something wrong. And so that was that little opening, that thorn started to pull out a little bit, and I could see that it was there. And that's what started the journey for me.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. I think we all have experienced those moments where something happens and your mind is just racing afterwards and you wish you could like take back the words, or you're going over everything that was said, like that you said, that this person said, like analyzing it from every single aspect that you can. And then eventually at some point you just have to realize like this is doing nothing.
But for me, it was like, looking back on it later. At the time, it was incredibly traumatic. But looking back on it, it's like, that's what started my journey. And if those two women had not done that, would I have had the opportunity or the realization that my childhood was still affecting me? I don't know, right? So it was a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think like we have these opportunities come into our life where we can choose what we do with it. So that could have been a moment for you where you just let the situation let you spiral, or you can take it and learn from it and realize that there's something like more that you want to do. So that's really amazing. Yeah. So, how did you start your journey?
Well, I didn't know what to do at the time because
Hmm.
I had tried things over the years. Like I knew I was reactionary. I knew I had PTSD. I knew that. That just got me to the point where I was absolutely determined to change. And it was in that time frame that I went to this doctor's appointment. And he was a holistic physician, so he had more tools in his toolbox. He was also a parent at my school, so he actually knew me from my kids. You know, he knew me as another parent at the school. And he knew I shouldn't have been that stressed out because I was a stay-at-home mother with 2 healthy young boys, right? Everything was pretty good. But he recognized that I was really stressed. And he asked me on the scale of 0 through 10 what my stress level was. And I said 8. And then he asked me why. And that was the question that made me realize, okay, it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19, because the tears from that event was still just under the surface 2 decades later, because I hadn't dealt with it. But that was kind of the trauma, the big trauma that was on top of all the other ones. It was the one I had to deal with. And he tapped with me. He used this technique, EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique. It's also called tapping because we're tapping on certain places on our body as we're talking something through. So he tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes. And, you know, that's a long time for a doctor. I let the tears flow. And when I walked away from that appointment, I could tell the story of her death in my mind for the first time ever without those tears wanting to come up. So that was the beginning.
That's so incredible. That's obviously a very, very traumatic event. And it makes sense that that was stored in you for so long. And to see that much of a shift after just one 15-minute session, that you were able to, I'm sure there was more work to do than that, but at least release like those emotions that were right under the surface to be able to talk about it and share that story. That's really incredible.
Yeah. I
For
mean,
sure.
we're really like an onion, you know, we really have layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of all these different, the trauma and the programming, just everything that's stored inside of us. But you've got to get that first layer uncovered before you can start, you know, opening up and finding out everything that's inside. So for
Yeah.
me, that big event of my mother's death was just holding everything in. I needed to work through it. And you're right, it wasn't just that one session. I had to go through it multiple times. And that's one of the things you do with EFT is you go through a story from the beginning to the end. You talk through it, exactly what happened. And then you go back to the beginning again and you do it again. And each time you do that, the subconscious mind is opening up and showing you more details of the story that you had forgotten. They'd been hidden in your subconscious mind. So as you do it more and more, you get more details of the story, which is also how we open up our childhood, right? I think you
Yeah.
had a hard time remembering your childhood. I did too.
Yeah.
And it was all hidden underneath all these other traumas. So that's how you do it with EFT. You just go through the story again and again, tapping through it each time, tapping as the emotions come up until you can talk through the whole story with no emotions left at all. And it just sounds like you're reading from a book. And that's how you know you've cleared it.
I know you mentioned the layers, but it is literally working through. So, like, you're starting at kind of a top layer, and then you're tapping on that, and then you keep working like deeper and deeper. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to go about it. When I started with EFT, I just worked on day to day. I'd worked on my mother right through this doctor. I worked on that memory, but I would use it more on a day to day basis. So I had noticed during the day when I was feeling emotional. I had 2 young boys at home, so it was easy for me to get emotional. And I would notice if I was getting frustrated or something, and then I would tap. I would tap on,
Mm.
you know, I'm frustrated that this happened or that happened, or whatever it was, until the frustration had left. And the tapping itself releases the tension that's stored in the nervous system. So it kind of creates an interrupt. So we start reacting differently. We let the emotion leave the body, and the next time we don't react the same way. So I
Okay.
would do that. I'd bring myself back to peace, carry on with my day, and then notice the next time. Right. And as you start to work with that, you become able to catch it earlier. Right. So to begin with, I might only notice one time a day when I'm becoming emotional. But each day I'd keep doing it and I'd become more and more aware and would catch it earlier. And I could tell things were changing. I could tell I wasn't getting as emotional, which was really nice, but I wanted more and I wanted it faster. So I
Mm.
wrote down all my traumas, all my emotional memories, all the programming, all the phrases my dad would use, all those things, sheets and sheets of paper.
Mm.
and I tap through one each night. So one of the things you're doing with tapping, so one of the things I tapped on, something like a phrase my dad would use, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
that's a
common
phrase.
one.
Yes, right. So I might tap on that. And as I tapped on that and the emotion starts to dissipate, memories of times when he said that would pop into my mind. And then I
Mm.
could tap through one of those memories at a time, each one at a time, and release the emotions around those particular episodes. Right. So
Wow.
that is the onion unraveling, right?
Yeah.
The memories are connected. They're all connected inside of you. So, and even anything that's happening right now, right? If you're seeing something on the news or some person has said something that triggers you, you could work on where you feel with that right now. But as you do that, as the emotion releases, a memory of when you've experienced the same feeling before will probably pop into your mind. Then you can work on that one. Then maybe as you release that one, another memory might pop into your mind. Maybe someone else reminds you of that same person who said that same thing. That will pop into your mind. So you just go deeper and deeper and deeper inside of your memory or inside of your subconscious mind, and it all starts to unravel.
Wow. I mean, that's really cool. Who would have thought that just tapping somewhere would be able to do all of this? Wow. Now, it sounds like a lot of dedication. How long did this take you in the evening to do, like for each thing you wrote down?
I was very dedicated. I was
Yeah.
determined to change. So I would tap for about an hour to an hour and a half each night
Wow.
on one episode or one belief, and then go to the next one the next night. I would also review the previous night's one to make sure it was cleared. And if it
Mhm.
wasn't, I might have to do something else, right? Because the subconscious mind is opening up, so more
Yeah.
details of a memory might come up, and then you might have something more to tap on. So yeah, and I went through all those sheets of paper. So I don't know. I wish I had kept a diary or something at the time, but it was many, many weeks, probably months that I did it until I'd gone through them all. But the changes were just absolutely worth doing, because it's stored tension. It's tension that's been stored inside for decades. It's
Right.
got to feel good to release, and it does feel good.
Yeah. So I'm wondering for people who might not have the time to be able to dedicate that much every evening, is it still effective if you are spending less time doing it?
Absolutely, it's effective. It's just probably not as you still need the
Yeah,
time because
it will
because
take
it's
longer.
right. Yes, because the emotions are still stored inside, and you've got to allow them time to release, allow them the tapping time for them to release. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, you can do it. If you spend 5 minutes going to the bathroom during the day, right? You can tap sitting on the toilet. Yeah.
Okay. So so it's not like it has to be you necessarily intentionally setting aside time for this. You can do it throughout the day. I mean, you're sitting in traffic.
I don't recommend driving and doing
Oh,
it
okay.
at the beginning, but eventually
Yeah.
you'll be able to do it. And I can easily drive and tap at the same time. So, but to begin with, until you really know the points and you're really confident doing it, I wouldn't do it. But you can do it seeing at the traffic lights. And yeah, and
Yeah.
all you're doing is especially if you have the emotion already, right? If you're frustrated already,
Mm.
or if you're feeling some emotion, you don't even need to use words, right? You can just tap, and the tapping itself will allow the emotion to release. But you use words to bring the emotion back, all right, to bring the memory back into the body and the emotions back into the body. And then the tapping releases the emotions, right? So that's why when
Okay.
we're talking, like if I was talking through my mother's death, I say the words to bring myself back to that moment, to bring the emotions back into the body so that I can release them.
Right. So if the emotion is readily available, you are currently feeling it, then you don't necessarily need to be saying anything along with it. But if there's like something specific in your mind where you're like, I know I need to do some healing or some releasing around this area, then you would call it back in by saying your statement or whatever it is.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
My youngest son used to have nightmares when he was around 8 or so, something like that. And I would just go and tap on him, right? He already had the
Mm.
fear of whatever he'd been dreaming in his body. I would just tap gently on his points. And then he would get to the place he'd say, okay, mom, you can go now. I can go back to sleep. So, yeah, you don't need to say anything.
Wow. Okay, that's incredible. And that's really accessible.
Absolutely. It's so easy to do. Yeah. Now, there are a lot of YouTube videos and such online about using EFT. There's a couple of things to keep in mind.
Mhm.
A lot of them use scripts. So they use words and you tap along with those words. However, those words are not your words. Your
Yeah.
words are what resonate inside of your body. And you want to use your own words if you can.
Okay.
And you want to stick with the negative. You know, we're so programmed that we need to go to the positive, right? We should be thinking positively, but we're not. This is a technique that releases the negative. It's only the negative that is stored in the body as tension. So
Mm.
we have to stick with the negative, even though it might feel uncomfortable to begin with. It's the negative that's stuck in there, right? It's the traumas, it's the sad things, it's the humiliations, it's all the bad stuff. And that's what we're looking for.
Okay. So in a previous interview you did, you said that eventually you were able to hold your awareness inside your body. So I'm wondering, when we do a body scan, it's relatively easy to pinpoint physical pain in the body. But when we're doing a scan for emotional pain, like to see or figure out where we're holding those repressed emotions, will we come across like different emotions such as fear or sadness or anger? Or like what would it feel like? What should we expect with that?
Okay, this is a tricky question because it depends on our depth of self awareness. So, when I
Okay.
started this journey, I didn't have any self awareness. I did not know what emotion I was feeling. I didn't know anything about where I was feeling it at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what EFT does, as you do it more and more, your self awareness deepens as the subconscious mind opens up. They're kind of one and the same thing. So you start to become aware of your emotions. So you'd be able to name your emotion, right? It would be easy to name your emotion. Oh, okay, I'm feeling really frustrated because this or that happened. You can verbalize it very easily. The next layer of self-awareness is being aware of the physical sensations of the emotions. So
Mm.
frustration is held somewhere in the body. Now, I could not have told you where it was held in the body when I started this work, right?
Right.
But now I can. Frustration for me is like in my sternum and my ribs, my solar plexus area. Can you tell where frustration is in your body?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Would it feel like, so those areas that you're mentioning, would you feel just like tension there?
Yes, it's tension, it's
Okay.
tightness. Yes. So if you think you're frustrated, try and work out where you're feeling tense in your body. Different from other tension, right?
Mm.
I mean, we often tense a lot of the time, but what's specific to frustration?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think back because I remember I was frustrated this morning and I'm trying to think about how I was feeling and I can't. No, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and see, I couldn't have done that either, right? So you can't really
No.
ask someone. Well, you can ask someone that question, but whether they can answer you depends on the level or the depth of self awareness. But when I
Yeah.
became aware at that level, then I didn't need to use EFT as much. And what I did was I focused on that tension. I could feel
Mhm.
the tension and I just focused on it because my ability to focus had been honed by all this tapping work. Right? I
Okay.
could keep my focus on one thing, one feeling, and keep it there. So that's what I did with these sensations. I would just hold my focus on the sensations and at some point I would actually feel them release,
Okay.
which was nice. So I kept doing
Yeah.
that instead of tapping. I still tap as well, but that was kind of, it felt like the next level, the next layer of the journey for me.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So we can become more aware by starting with the EFT tapping, using the statements, or if that feeling is readily available. And
Right.
then from time doing that, our awareness will naturally grow and we might be able to move on to where you were at next.
Right? Because each time we let go of one of those hidden emotions or that hidden tension, we're
Yeah.
kind of releasing one layer of us. We're letting go of one barrier, one shield that protects us and that prevents us from going inside. So as we release that layer upon layer upon layer, we're able to get deeper inside of us. So we're able to become aware of ourselves at a deeper level. Yeah.
Hmm.
So for me, that was the second step. And then I went further still. And
Yeah. What came next?
at one point, I realized I could put my awareness inside my body and keep it there after the tension had released, which I know sounds like a really weird thing to say. And
Please.
I've tried to put it in words over the years, but imagine you have a toothache or a stomach ache, right? You can feel, you can sense where that pain is coming from.
Yes.
But once the pain has left, you can't put your awareness back on where it was because there's nothing calling your attention to it anymore.
Right.
Right. I found that I could go back inside and I could sense inside. I could feel around. I could feel tension versus no tension. I could sense it was dark versus light. And so I started to play it. I was just playing and I thought, well, okay, well, what happens now? So I just kind of moved my awareness around inside and I found a place with tension, and then I would do the same thing. I would focus on it, just hold my awareness on it, not try and change it. So, right, so that's something else that we do with EFT, right? We're just accepting how we're feeling. We're accepting what we're thinking. We're accepting the story we're telling ourselves. We're just accepting it, and the tapping releases the energy. So when we're able to feel the sensations, we're doing the same thing. We're just focusing on it, allowing it to be felt, not changing it. We're not trying to change it, although obviously we want it to release, but we're not trying to change it. It changes by being accepted and acknowledged and felt, and then it releases on its own.
Wow. You said a couple of things that I was like, I need to ask about this. Okay, so the first one I'm thinking of, the darkness and lightness. Can you maybe just clarify on that? Like what does that feel like, or what does take us deeper?
Well, let me try and explain that. I've never actually explained that before. So imagine you've got your eyes closed at night, right? It's dark, but if someone puts a light on somewhere with your eyes closed, you can sense that it's light, right? There's some light somewhere.
Yeah,
right? So you're
right.
sensing dark versus light, even though you've got your eyes closed. Well, it's the same thing inside. I can sense where it's dark, which is where the tension is. Where there's tension, there's darkness. And as the tension releases, the light kind of fills it in underneath it. The light was there all along, but it was kind of being held out by the darkness. And as we release the tension, it goes back to light.
Okay. Is this connected to the third eye? That's what that makes me think of.
Yes. I talk of it as the inner eye because it allows me to see inwards, right? Inward sight or inside sight.
Right. Yes. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So what else did you do on the healing journey? Was there another step, or was that all
Well,
of
that's
them?
where I am now. It took me a long time, but eventually I could put my awareness inside my head, which was huge. I worked in my body for quite a while. I was, kept trying to see if I could get inside my head, and I couldn't, but eventually I could. And that was wild for me because the pain and the tension inside my head was just unbearable. It was unbelievable how much pain and tension was inside my head that I had no idea was there because it was stuck in my subconscious mind until I became aware of it. And then would do the same thing. I just do the same thing over and over again, right? I'd focus. I had this incredible pain inside my left cheek. And I would just focus on it for a second or two, just feel it, and it would release. Just do it over and over. And at one point, I got to a place where I actually heard and felt something release. And it sounded and it felt like old fabric ripping. And it was kind of scary at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. But that's when I did some research and realized, okay, I think it's an adhesion in the connective tissue that is releasing. So I realized I wasn't hurting myself. So I carried on. I just kept releasing more and more. And it got to the place where I could actually feel my skull bones actually relax. And I hadn't known they weren't relaxed before. Right? That's part of this
Right.
journey. We have no idea how much is hidden inside. But I felt them relax. So I knew they had been tense. And I just kept going. I'm now relaxing or releasing tension stored in my cheekbones, my jaw bones, inside my palate, just inside my skull, and just releasing tension over and over every day.
Wow. So while we're talking about the changes that you saw, can you take us through what are all of the changes that you saw through doing this?
Okay, so I had some x-rays taken. There was just, I've had orthodontic work 3 times throughout my life. So they were just regular orthodontic photos. I had a new set taken, and I knew things had shifted. So I went back and found the old photos so I could
Mm.
see what had changed. And my eye sockets had aligned, and I hadn't realized they weren't aligned before, but I could see that that they had shifted. I could see that my neck has straightened. I've got more to do for sure, but it's much straighter than it's ever been in my life. My jawbone was way off to the side. Again, I hadn't looked at my old x-rays, so I hadn't realized how far off it was, but now it's much more centered. So I think those are the main things. And then I've grown 3/4 of an inch because of that decompression of my neck, and everything else. That burden that's been lifted from me has allowed me to grow.
That's incredible. What do you think it is that caused it? Like how did physical changes occur from releasing emotions?
Because it's all connected. The emotions are actually stored in those physical sensations, right? That's tension in our body. And as we release that tension at a deeper and deeper level, it is affecting the physical. It's all connected. I believe I was looking through the connective tissue, right? So all this tension, I believe, is stored in the connective tissue, which is throughout our whole body. It's all connected. So we release tension in one place. I release tension somewhere in my torso. It always releases in my neck as well.
Mm.
Right. So and oftentimes I will release something in my left cheek. It will release something in my right neck, and it might go all the way right down to my right foot. Right. So it doesn't matter whether we're working on the memories or the emotions, they're still working on the physical. Or we can work on the physical, and it's also connected to the memories and the emotions. So when I first was able to put my awareness inside, I would focus on a place with tension, and often as it released, a memory would pop into my mind of the place memory of something that happens, and the memory would just go poof. It would just disappear. I wouldn't keep hold of the memory, but
Right.
it was totally connected to that tension that just released. It's all connected.
Fascinating. I believe that holding emotions, especially those negative emotions, I say quotes because I think all emotions are emotions that are meant to be felt. But if you're holding anger or resentment, then it can really affect your body to the point where I do believe that it can cause physical illnesses like dis-ease, right? Is that that's connected here, right?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it's all the same. I think emotions are dis-ease inside of the body.
Mm.
So we want to find them and release them. It's just energy that's stuck in the body. This really
Yeah.
helped me once I really grasped this, that the memories, the traumas, the emotions are simply energy that is stuck inside of our body, right? It's nowhere else, right? Different people have different memories. It's just inside of our body. And once we release it, it's gone, right? The
Mm.
dis-ease has gone, and we start attracting different things into our future because we're then different people. That's what I wanted. I wanted my life to be different. I wanted to feel different. I wanted to be different. And to do that, I really
Mm.
had to change who I was on the inside. And what I realized is to do that, I had to release this tension that was stored in the connective tissue.
Yeah, so that's with law of attraction, it's all about matching your vibration, right? So is that what you mean? By doing this, by releasing all of these repressed emotions and trauma, you were able to shift your energy so that you were on a different level to attract other things in? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it slightly differently from other people who talk about it out there. I think of the whole of us as being a signal. Everything about us is part of our signal. So it's our size, it's our shape, it's our hair, right? Everything about us is part of our signal, right? So if I shave off all my hair right now and go out into society, I'm going to attract different comments from people, right? Different, like if I went to a store, someone might think I might need a hat, right? Because I wouldn't have any hair, right? I'm going to attract different things into my life because my physical aspect has changed. What we don't realize is that tension stored inside of us from past traumas is huge. Connective tissue pulls with a power of 2,000 pounds per square inch. It's really unbelievable once you become aware of it, right? And it took me years and years and years to actually become aware of that force inside of me pulling my face out of alignment, right? I think if we're perfectly symmetrical, we probably don't have those forces pulling us the same way. But if we do, that's a lot of force, right? So that really affects our signal. So if we release that tension, we're going to emit a very different signal. And I think part of that signal is brainwaves. I know I've had several EEGs done, and I know I have a lot of gamma rays, which are the high frequency rays, and
Okay.
I didn't before, right? So I think that's part of raising the vibration. I think our brain waves change. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I think part of it is. And that's due to releasing all that tension from the past that stores inside of us.
That's so fascinating. I feel like I might be backtracking a little bit here, but you said something and it made me think of this. I'm wondering when we are holding tension in our body, I know you've mentioned like the physical changes, but in what ways is that tension like negatively affecting or can negatively be affecting our lives?
Well, think of us as like a guitar, right, with
Mm,
strings, right? And the strings can be tuned or untuned, right? And if they're tuned too tightly,
yeah.
then we might be called highly strung, right?
Yes. Okay.
And someone who listens to that, whatever tune we're putting off, it's not going to feel comfortable to most people, right? It will sound out of tune, right? So we're not going to attract really nice people to us. We're going to attract people who kind of resonate with an out of tuned guitar, right?
Mm.
So that's kind of how it works. We're just going to attract things, right? If we have trauma stored inside from something, say we broke our leg or something, we're going to attract stories from people who have also broken their leg. Right? If we hear
Mm.
someone talking somewhere in a crowd about a broken leg, we're going to be instantly attracted to them because
Yeah.
we have that experience inside of us.
Yeah.
Right? So if we want to change what we're being attracted to, we want to change that story inside of us, and releasing all those different traumas and those memories, the emotional memories, is going to change that story inside of us.
Yes. Yes. I can totally see this.
Okay, good.
That's amazing. So it is literally all just connected. So you can literally change your life just by starting at the beginning with tapping on different emotions that come up.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the other things I did, and this is kind of further down, not at the beginning, but further
Yeah.
down a few years in, is one of those books. It wasn't Untethered Soul, but one of those in that grouping of books has lists of emotions. So
Mm.
I would just tap through each emotion. And because I'd opened my subconscious mind enough at that point, I could tap through an emotion like humiliation, and all the memories of humiliation would come to mind, right? And I could
Wow.
tap through each one, so that the word humiliation really doesn't have anything inside of me anymore. It doesn't really mean much because those memories are no longer triggered inside of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a deeper layer of, or deeper way of clearing things out to do that. So yeah, I was determined.
Yeah, that is so incredible. So I'm wondering, can you possibly walk us through like a round of this so that if nobody has seen this before, they kind of have a better idea of how to do it?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, let's do a simple thing like I'm afraid of making a phone call.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people can have that experience, or maybe you've always had it or had it at least one time. So what we do is we start with what we call the karate chop point, which is on the side of the hand.
Okay.
And we're tapping firm enough that you're kind of creating an interrupt into the nervous system, but you're not hurting yourself.
Okay.
Right? So I would say, from what I can see, do a little harder, a little more firmly. Yeah, but yeah, just make sure you don't hurt yourself. And we start with a phrase or an opening statement. Now, I've changed the way I say it because a lot of people had problems with the general opening statement. So I say something like, I'm afraid of making this phone call. That's my truth in this moment. And it's okay that I'm afraid of making this phone call. Right? So you say that 3 times. I'm afraid of making this phone call. That's my truth in this moment. And it's okay that I'm afraid of making this phone call. I'm afraid of making this phone call. That's my truth in this moment. And it's okay that I'm afraid of making this phone call. Okay, and then you start on the first point is the crown point on the top of the head. Okay. I'm afraid of making this phone call. So you just shorten kind of what you're saying to the basics. I'm afraid of making this phone call. You tap about 7 times on each point. So that's the first point. The second point is the beginning of the eyebrow. I'm afraid of making this phone call. And the next point is on the bone on the edge of the eye. I'm afraid of making this phone call. The next point is the bone underneath the eye. I'm afraid of making this phone call. Next point is under the nose. I'm afraid of making this phone call. Next point is on the chin. I'm afraid of making this phone call. 2 more points. Next one is the collarbone point. I use both hands. I'm afraid of making this phone call. And the last point is under the arm where the bra strap goes if you have one. I'm afraid of making this phone call. And then you take a deep breath, you let it out. And that's 1 round of EFT. So then you think about it again. How afraid are you of making this phone call? And if the fear is still there, you do it again. Now, if some memory comes up or some other thought, maybe you're afraid of what the person is going to say. Maybe you're afraid they're going to say no, or you're afraid they're going to say yes, or they're afraid they're going to reject you. Then you can change the wording and you can say, I'm afraid of being rejected. I don't want to be rejected, right? Then you can say that. And then eventually you'll get to the place where you'll think, okay, I can make that phone call now.
Wow. After doing that, I actually am feeling so calm and at peace. I literally feel like my energy shifted.
Nice. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very soothing.
Good. So now imagine if you're triggered, right, and you're emotional and you do that, right? Yeah. It can allow you to relax and become peaceful again. Because when you go back to what I was talking about, the law of attraction, when we're emitting a signal every second of every day. So if we're triggered, right, and reactionary and very emotional for a long period of time, that's the signal we're emitting for a long period of time. So if we can bring ourselves back to peace and just be emitting a peaceful signal, right, it's actually going to change our future because that's the signal we're emitting and that's what we're attracting back into our life.
Bringing back in. Yeah. For sure. Well, and I mean, who doesn't want to feel peaceful over stressed?
Well, some people are a little bit embarrassed by the tapping itself, right? That's why it's good to maybe do it in the bedroom or a bathroom and do it on your own for a little while. And when people are very comfortable, they're willing to do it in front of someone else. But it's something you can do on your own.
Yeah. Or, like us, we do it on a podcast. That's really incredible. I'm very excited to take this into my life and try and use it. Is there anything else, like any other tips or anything that we should know?
Well, let me tell you that I do have some resources for the tapping, right? My YouTube channel has a couple of videos about EFT. There's a demo video and the words to use. So I recommend those because they're not the positive ones. A lot of practitioners that move more to the positive, right? They'll tap on the positive, right? I'm beautiful, or I attract this money, or whatever. But that's not what's stuck inside of us. It's the opposite that's stuck inside of us. And if you go to my website, annhince.com, there's a free PDF download, which is my 2-page summary of EFT, right? It talks you through all the steps. So that's that.
Yeah. And then in your book, what do you outline in there?
I go through the 3 steps. So I go all the way through EFT, and then I go through feeling your feelings, and then I talk through actually being able to put your awareness inside your body. So because I want people to get to that place. That's where I am now, and life feels so different than it did before. And I didn't know what I can do now was possible. So I want other people to experience it and be able to shift their skull bones too, right? And grow as well.
I could use some extra height. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I will definitely have everything linked below. And I guess I was going to ask where, like for somebody brand new, where should they start? But I guess that's exactly it. They should start with the EFT and probably go to your website or your YouTube channel and follow along with a video.
Right. But even before that, the very first step is just to start noticing during the day how you're feeling. I would ask myself, okay, how am I feeling right now? And do I want to feel this way again? So start being aware of how you're feeling during the day. Because until you can do that, until you can step back and say, okay, look at me, I'm starting to get frustrated, or I'm starting to get angry. Until you can do that and separate yourself from the emotion, you can't do anything about it. But once you can notice that, then you can say, okay, I'm going to do something about it. And that's when you can tap, right? But you can't do that until you are aware of your emotions during the day. So that's always the first step.
So when you were first starting out, did you set a reminder or something to just check in with yourself every hour, I think I've heard before? Or was it literally just, oh, I'm feeling a really strong emotion?
I'm not even sure we had cell phones back then. I probably put a Post-it or something on the wall, right, on the bathroom windows to ask myself. That's probably what I did, because I still do
Yeah.
that to this day. But yes,
And
that is a good idea. Yes, set an alarm, a reminder throughout the day, just asking yourself and put words to it, right? I'm
yeah.
feeling frustrated because this didn't happen or this happened, right? Put words to it, because those would be the words then that you tap with, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then as you do
Yeah.
more and more, you start becoming more aware of those emotions and then the physical sensations.
Yeah. I love this.
Good.
Any final advice or
Well, one thing I do really like to share, because
yeah.
I didn't know this years ago, right?
Yeah.
I was suicidal as a teenager. It's like
Mm.
I didn't know what the point of life was, or why bother. But there is so much more depth to life at this point, right? With this depth of awareness than I ever knew was possible before. Right? I can feel music inside my body
Mm.
because I've released all those barriers to it, so I can feel it inside my body, which means having a conversation with someone is different, right? Because I know I'm taking in those sound waves in a different way than I was before, right? So I can notice if someone is breathing deeply or not, right? When we're
Mm.
lying, we don't breathe into our full body because we don't want to see what the truth is underneath there. Right? So you can
Okay.
tell when you can feel yourself deeply inside, you can feel other people deeply inside as well.
Mm.
And our skull is our echo chamber for our voice, right? So I can sing different notes. There were notes that I couldn't sing before that I can sing now. And I've released my breath enough that I can hold a note for a long time, and I couldn't do that before. So there's all sorts of subtle changes that come about that make life fun. Yeah.
That's amazing. For the sensing people, I definitely experienced that, but I feel like this might not be connected, but I thought I would ask. So I'm an empath, so I can like sense shifts very quickly and easily. Is that connected to this?
I think empath is a depth of awareness. There is an awareness there. And I would say that I was that too. But we can take on those emotions and think that they're other people and then not deal with them.
Yeah.
Or we can assume because we can feel them inside of us that they are partly ours and we can work with them. Right? So we can be manipulated by other people's emotions, or we can work with those emotions and realize that we don't have to be manipulated by them. Right? So if I'm sensing someone else, I'm sensing some emotion in someone else, I'm sensing them inside of me, therefore I would tap on them and let it go, because then you can stand in your own power.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so you don't take it in fully and like allow it to become part of you.
Right. Well, I do take it in. The tapping, right, has
Mm.
to allow it. But I would talk through it. Okay, I really feel that that person over there is having a hard time. I can feel it inside of me. Where can I feel it inside of me? Right. Once you're aware, you'll be able to pinpoint where it is. I can feel that tension in my solar plexus, and I will tap through that and allow that to release. Then I'm allowing them to be them. They can go through their own thing. I can be aware that they're going through their own thing, but it's no longer affecting me. Yeah.
Okay. Where you feel it in the body, is it the chakras
No, it's all
or is
over.
it's anywhere? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I've found through doing podcasts, I'll ask people, can you feel where something like frustration is in your body? And people will give all sorts of different answers. So that depends, I think, on our level of the onion, right? How far, how
Yeah.
deep have we got? And it will be different. 1 year, maybe, if you do a year of work and you come back, okay, where is frustration being held now? You'll have released many, many layers, and you will
Yeah.
feel frustration in a different place than you did before.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, frustration, like you asked me before, frustration, I don't know if I can pinpoint that one, but there are definitely other feelings that I would be able to pinpoint, like anger, that's in my blood. Okay. My blood is boiling.
But people will often say, right, anger could be in the fists, right? It
Yeah.
could be in the jaw. A lot of people are old anger in the jaw or
Yeah.
the shoulders. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's different. But that's
It
how we
feels,
learn, right? As a
yeah.
child, that's how we learn those emotions, right? A mother or parent or teacher or something will say to a child, oh, you're frustrated or you're angry.
Mhm.
And that child will associate the tension or the feeling inside of their body with the word,
Mm.
right? So it could be different for different children, right? How they
Mhm.
determine what that word feels like to them. So we're kind of reversing that process here, coming back to being
Yeah.
children, right? We're letting go of the word itself and feeling those feelings underneath it.
Yeah, this definitely seems very tied to inner child work, or at least going back to childhood for like your beliefs and the things that you were taught.
Yes. Yes.
Um, on the comment about the emotions, like, do you think that we should, or do you even have an opinion on this? Do you think that we should be naming those emotions for the kids? Like, as in, if we feel like they're frustrated, saying, like, oh, you're frustrated, or allowing them to, I mean, they might not know the word, but just allowing them to express it.
Well, I think probably using the word is useful, but absolutely
Mhm.
maybe asking, where do you feel it? Where do you feel that tension? Right? Can you just allow that tension to be felt? I'm not quite sure how you'd put that in words for a child, but just
Yeah.
like sit and feel that frustration. Just allow yourself to feel frustrated. It's
Yeah.
okay to feel frustrated, right? Most of the time, I think children do not feel, they don't have the time, or they're not allowed to feel those emotions, and they get stored inside, right? But if we
Yeah.
just allow them to feel it, just like a deer would do, right? Right, once it's got free from a lion, a deer will just stand there and shake it all off, right?
Mhm.
And that's what we need to do. We just need to feel it and just let it go.
Right. Learned that recently that animals, when they shake, it's that they have excess energy and they're regulating their nervous system, which is so cool.
To be able to do that too.
Yeah, we can just shake. Yeah, that's really fascinating. The untethered soul. like we were talking about before. That book was pretty life-changing for me because that is when I learned about the triggers. I mean, obviously I had an understanding of it before, but it was never put in that way. And also just really learning that if you don't feel the feeling, then it's just gonna stay in you. So, like, you can choose to have that moment, maybe, like the 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, of feeling this really intense emotion, and then it's gone. Or you can choose to push it away, repress it, and then you're going to constantly be dealing with it for whoever knows how long until it's actually finally out of you.
Yeah, it all gets stuck inside, and we are so good at suppressing and repressing and bypassing all these emotions, and we don't realize that it just gets stuck inside. And then it builds that house that he talks about, that we're like
Yes.
in a prison cell, and we have no idea. And that's part of my journey. It's like I've realized we have so much tension stored inside of us. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. No one would believe how much tension I have felt and released inside of my body. And I had no idea it was there. It was
Yeah.
just hidden. It's all hidden from our awareness. And we just don't realize we're in this prison until we start doing this work and we become aware, oh, there's another layer of freedom, another layer of freedom, just one after the other. We can just keep going and just becoming aware at each layer. And, it's just, it kind of, we keep ourselves safe, because if I had been aware of all this tension right at the beginning, I probably would have died, because it was just unbelievable, unbearable. And we're not. We're just shown it one layer at a time, and we only have to work through one layer at a time.
Yeah. Well, and that is the incredible thing about our bodies and our minds is that we really are only given what we can handle at that time. And then, like you said, as you're working through it, more will come up. I think that's why they say a healing journey because it literally never ends.
I do think there is an end, but it's a long way away for me, at least.
Yeah, same. Well, thank you so much, Anne. This has been amazing, so incredibly informative. Cannot wait to try this.
Thank you. It's been really fun. It was really fun conversation.